To start the Zephyr application, you just double tap the screen. Comes up with a splash screen showing the version number as well as the copyright and the company information. Tap OK. The first thing it asks you to do is remove all the balance tubes from the centrifuge. So we open the centrifuge, make sure there's no balance tubes, make sure it's empty. We can then close the centrifuge back up and hit the OK button. It's searching for the devices, so it's looking at the luminometer and then the centrifuge. They both come on in a very light color background to show that they've been found and that the hardware check is complete. Through most of the application, you'll see I interact very little with the keyboard. Everything is controllable via on-screen touch buttons. So just go to the next screen. It shows you graphically to open the reader door. So we go over to the reader door, open it. It then asks you to close it. So we close it. And now what it's doing is it's checking the background information. It takes about 10 to 15 seconds. It's just making sure that the Sirius luminometer is performing correctly. It's doing a calibration check. The only button you need to hit is the Run One Sample button. So one sample test that we'll be doing. And it's asking you to put in an operator ID. Name, John, via the keyboard, or if you have pre-printed barcodes, you could scan in operator 1, and it scans that into the operator ID. Either one is very acceptable. Once the operator ID has been entered, you click Next, and you select a cartridge ID. Cartridge ID we also have on our laminated barcode sheet. And I'm going to select the only one that's on this for dry test tubes, the 0F demo assay. If we were looking for Ralstonia, Listeria, Bacillus anthracis, or the like, each of these numbers would be different. On our true assays as well, instead of all zeros, those numbers would encode a creation date, an expiration date, and some other information about the lot from the cells that were produced. So after the cartridge ID is in, you click Next, and it knows from that 0F barcode that this is just going to be a demo. We're going to be running with some dry paint tubes. There's three choices here: sample, QC positive, and QC negative. Because we don't need to run quality control for non-actual tests, we're just going to again be using the fluorescent tubes. We're going to be leaving the sample as the choice. And clicking the next button again. Sample ID. Again, this is a free-form entry. You can make it ID 042, F0, or again, you can use the barcodes if you know what your sample IDs are beforehand, and this barcode encoded SMP 001284, which gets transferred into there. This is up to the end user. It is not it's not required for us, but in a typical lab scenario, you have your own IDs associated with any particular test. You then hit the next button, and it's asking you to load the centrifuge and click the next button. In a real test scenario, this is where you would do your sample prep. In other words, if you're doing some powder swabs, it's where you would do your sample prep. In this scenario, we're just going to use some preset dry light tubes. I'm going to take a blank tube, one of our what's called a low light tube, and put them into the centrifuge. You always want to use centrifuge tubes in pairs so that when it spins at a high RPM, it maintains a good balance. Just set one in one in the other. This one, it has some small stripes on it. It is the blank tube. This one has a tiny bit of fluorescent paint at the end. Not very much. It's almost invisible to the human eye. Set that in there. Close the lid. And then once we've done that, that shows the process. We're going to hit the next button. And you're going to cut this again, but remember, this one's going to be the fast part. So, all right, going to hit the next button. The centrifuge is spinning for 5 seconds. It's now requesting to transfer from the centrifuge into the luminometer. And these are the actual light values in real time from that test tube being generated by the Sirius. What you're seeing on the x-axis is time from 0 to 60 seconds. On the y-axis, it's the relative light units. It's how much light is being generated at that point. So what you see in the first 12 or so seconds is flatline. The tube was actually in the centrifuge. We then opened the luminometer door and we got this door spike. We call that the door spike because light gets into the luminometer. And then this slow degradation of light as the amount of light coming off that fluorescent paint goes down over that 60-second period of time. After the 60 seconds is done, another simple blue button comes on the screen to move to the next screen. We'll hit that. It says to remove the sample from the luminometer, just to remind you not to leave your samples in the luminometer. You can place it back in its case. On screen, we just acknowledge the alert to remove the sample, and we get the result. This particular assay knows it's looking for paint. It saw nice high values for the paint, so it generated a positive value. If it was a blank tube, it would have generated a negative result in that case. On screen, you're seeing the test date, July 26, the operator ID, and the cartridge ID. At that point, you can either hit print if you have a printer connected to print that information out, or hit the home button to go back and do the entire process again.